welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly Stevens. I'm the author of the young adult fantasy Fury and Rising, and this is English Nerd. So I'm currently still in the middle of A Tale of Two Cities series, going chapter by chapter through the book with observations, summary analysis, all of that. But the idea is that you have already read the chapters that I'm going to talk about, and this is just a supplemental extra to help you understand and appreciate this awesome book that I love so much. So we're in book 2, chapters 4 and 5. So that's Congratulatory and Jackal. At this point in the story, Charles Darnay has just been acquitted of treason and the Old Bailey. And so Congratulatory is, of course, congratulating him on his escape from death, essentially. So Congratulatory. At first, we get this view of the different witnesses who were against Charles Darnay, even though they didn't want to be. So Lucie, Manette, Dr. Manette, Mr. Lorry, all of those people. The only thing I want to say about this initial portion is that this is where Lucie Manette is described as the golden thread, which is the name of all of book 2. She's like the golden thread that ties everybody together. So in context, this is the, first or second page of that chapter. It says, only his daughter, speaking about Dr. Manette, only his daughter had the power of charming this black brooding from his mind. She was the golden thread that united him to a past beyond his misery and to a present beyond his misery. So the reason that her hair has always been described as golden is that there's this sense that she is a valuable person, not only in the life of Dr. Manette, but also we'll see there's a growing list of people who care about Lucie, and we'll start to see that more in this chapter. One new character that comes to the forefront just briefly, but importantly in this chapter, is Mr. Stryver. His name is not a coincidence. Dickens really likes to use names intentionally. So Lorry, for instance, is the name of a type of vehicle, and he ends up being the character who goes back and forth the most, probably between England and France. Stryver is just that. He's the kind of person who is big and bluff and shoulders his way forward and strives to get to the front, really. He is the front man in the lawyer duo. It's Stryver, and then behind the scenes there is Mr. Carton. So more on him in just a moment. But I want to point out a little bit of foreshadowing first. There is a moment when Darnay is coming up to thank Lucie for her participation and trying to stand up for him during this treason trial. And as he's approaching, there's this moment with Dr. Manette. Now, as always, I'm not going to give any spoilers without some sort of warning. I'm going to assume that you've read at least this far into the book, but if you haven't read past it, I want the surprise to still be a surprise. But here's the foreshadowing. It says, Dr. Manette's face had become frozen, as it were, in a very curious look at Darnay. An intent look, deepening into a frown of dislike and distrust, not even unmixed with fear. With this strange expression on him, his thoughts had wandered away. So it's unclear why he seems to recognize Darnay. Darnay is only about 25 years old at this point, and so he couldn't have been a jailer of Dr. Manette's in the Bastille, because he would have been only 19 or 20 at the oldest. If that were the case, he could hardly have been a prisoner unless he were a very young prisoner. So it's mysterious, but of course that's one of our main themes, that people are mysteries. So just put a pin in that. There is some foreshadowing there. We don't necessarily know everything there is to know about Darnay quite yet, or Dr. Manette for that matter. Okay, moving right along. We get Mr. Carton. Now, Mr. Carton is a terrible human being in these chapters, but I have quite the soft spot for him. One of my favorite illustrations by Fizz, the original illustrator for A Tale of Two Cities, is this one about this chapter, Congratulatory. You can see Stryver there. He's the big one, and then basically in the shadows we have Carton, who's the doppelganger of Darnay, of course, just lounging insolently against the wall. So one of my favorite interactions, I just have to point this out because I love it so much, is between Carton and Lorry, of all people. Mr. Lorry, of course, is our enlightenment figure, the one who is all about reason, all about order and business. And Carton is just aimless and careless, it seems. So Mr. Lorry is bothered that Carton is hanging around this congratulation circle, I guess. And he says, "If you'll excuse me, as very much your elder for saying so, I really don't know that it's your business." "Business, bless you, I have no business," said Mr. Carton. "It is a pity you have not, sir." "I think so too." "If you had," pursued Mr. Lorry, "perhaps you would attend to it." "Lord love you, no, I shouldn't," said Mr. Carton. I mean, you can't get much more obvious than that. Lorry's saying, "So, don't you have business to attend to? Like, what if you did? Would you go away?" And Carton just refuses to take the hint, and he sticks around. It's a great moment. So everybody leaves except for Darnay and Carton, and they're described as doubles, counterparts. It's really highlighted that they look the same, but Darnay is the more put together version and Carton is the more debauched version, despite their situation suggesting that it should be the other way around. So when it's just the two of them, Carton asks Darnay out to a celebratory dinner, but it is possibly the most awkward dinner that the world has ever seen, which I think is hilarious. So they go out to dinner, they toast to Miss Manettes, whom they both seem to like very, very much. And then Carton just keeps drinking, and Darnay starts getting worried that Carton is drunk, and he starts starts asking these really awkward questions. Like, "Do you think I particularly like you?" Like, what do you do? What do you do with that? You're sitting at dinner with somebody who has asked you to dinner, and the person says, "Do you think I like you particularly?" Darnay is actually, he navigates this very well, to his credit. He says, "You act as though you do, but I don't think you do." And Carton says, "Yep, that about sums it up right there." So toward the end of this super awkward dinner between the two doubles, remember the idea of parallel characters, of foils, of doubles is really strong in this story. We get a good glimpse into Carton's character for the first time. He's just been hanging around up to this point, but he describes himself toward the end of this chapter as a disappointed drudge. He says, "I care for no man on earth, and no man on earth cares for me," which is really sad. I mean, he's enormously depressed. Once Darnay leaves, and he gets out of there as soon as he can, who can blame him? Carton is left by himself, and he looks at his own reflection. And this is an important moment because he, by seeing Darnay, kind of sees what he could have been, and so he has to face the choices that he's made to lead him to this lot in life. Why is he a disappointed drudge? Why does he care for no man on earth, and no one on earth cares for him? So he says this. I'm going to read the whole thing because it's super important. If you read the entire book and then you go back to this, it is one of the most important early sections of the book by a lot. So Carton looks at himself in the mirror and he says this. "Do you particularly like the man?" he muttered at his own image. "Why should you particularly like a man who resembles you? There's nothing in you to like, you know that. Ah, confound you, what a change you have made in yourself. A good reason for taking to a man, that he shows you what you have fallen away from and what you might have been. Change places with him, and would you have been looked at by those blue eyes as he was, and commiserated by that agitated face as he was? Come on and have it out in plain words, you hate the fellow." I mean, there's a lot there. The only thing I'm going to clarify in case it was not clear, those blue eyes, those are Lucie's. He really likes Lucie and knows that he has no shot because somebody who looks like him, who's better than he is after her as well. So that's congratulatory. I love the awkward dinner. Chapter 5 is also a Carton chapter. It's called the Jackal. In this chapter, Carton has really 3 nicknames. The main one is the Jackal to Stryver's lion. The way I like to think about it is if they were a boy band, Carton would be the one writing all the songs and Stryver would be the one at the microphone that everybody knows about. But the way that Dickens puts it is that Stryver is the lion and Carton is the jackal who actually does all the work and brings the food to the lion. The other 2 nicknames for Carton in this chapter are Memory. Stryver calls him Memory because of Carton's excellent memory. He can always remember the right evidence to bring up in a trial. And he's called Seesaw Sydney because he was up one moment, down the next. His emotional roller coaster through school when they knew each other then. So those are the nicknames. Basically, in this chapter, Carton and Stryver just work together. Well, to be fair, Stryver just sits there and drinks and kind of oversees, and Carton sits there and drinks and works. So he has this towel around his head so that he can keep drink. It's bad. I mean, he's like severely alcoholic. So he can stave off a hangover while he continues to work through the night on these difficult cases. Stryver really doesn't help. He just criticizes him all the way along, which is a bummer. But we do get more of an insight into who Carton might be. And remember, we can't trust all of our first impressions of characters in this story because that theme that people are mysteries is so strong. But he says that he often would do exercises for other boys in school and not do his own, and he's really not sure why he's not further ahead in life where Stryver is. Stryver's trying to say, you could make more of yourself. Why aren't you better than you are? And Carton just says, I don't know. One interesting fact that we do pick up, in addition to what I just said, is that Stryver and Carton, when they were at school, basically did a study abroad situation in Paris, and so they can both speak French. Since this is a tale of 2 cities and we're looking at London and Paris, keeping track of the characters who can speak both languages, English and French, is a valuable thing to note. So Carton and Stryver both speak French. After this, we have Stryver. Stryver starts talking about how pretty Lucie is, which is uncomfortable because Stryver's kind of gross. But anyway, he says, let's toast to the pretty witness. And Sydney just gets all despondent and says, she's pretty. She was like a golden-haired doll. He's protesting too much, to quote Hamlet, as I do. He clearly likes her and he's just bitter. He's doing that thing where it's like, no, of course I don't like her. But he's just protesting to kind of make himself feel better and not admit that he really does like Lucie. We can tell a few different ways that he does like her, even though he's protesting that he doesn't in front of Stryver. This chapter ends with a sad little paragraph. It's so sad that it repeats the word sad lots of times. Sadly, sadly, the sun rose. It rose upon no sadder sight than a man of good abilities and good emotions, incapable of their directed exercise, incapable of his own help and his own happiness, sensible of the blight on him, and resigning himself to let it eat him away. I have mixed feelings about this final paragraph. Part of me feels really bad for Carton because he is clearly the smartest one in the room. He is a hard worker. He has all these positive things going for him. He's handsome because Darnay is described as handsome and he's described as exactly the same. He has all these things going for him, and yet he has just shrugged and given up and felt like he couldn't do anything to help his life. And that's not entirely true. Of course, we know that at this point in the story, meeting Darnay has kind of shaken him awake to that reality. He's come to himself in a dark wood to go with Inferno. All right, so that is it for today's video. If you have any thoughts or questions, make sure to post them down below. I'll get to those very quickly as I can. And don't forget to subscribe for more English nerdy goodness. See you next week.